Well, if the selection committee just wants to keep disrespecting the ACC every year, ACC is going to continue to overperform.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. And first of all, Kenton, before we get into this with the table being set now for the Final Four, I want to send a huge shout out to Candace Cooper. Candace is moving on to bigger and better things. She was nice enough to grace me with her seat. And I'll tell you, Kenton, for the last 2 years that I've been with this network, and I've also been involved with Locked On ACC, doing some guest spots and watching and listening to the show each and every day. Candace is a pro's pro, and I know everything she is up to from this point forward, she's going to kick butt doing that. So I'm certainly going to miss watching her, and I hope people don't mind looking at my face and listening to my voice too often here on Locked On ACC. But Kenton, how are you?
You know, I'm great as always. You're absolutely right. I gave Candace a few more grades than she probably should have had at her age, but it's that's the type of co-host I am. And Donno, get ready, brother. Get ready. You're gonna have to be here for some going off script, for some Kenton, what the hell? We talked about that in pre-production. Listen, that's how we gonna roll that thing. That's how we gonna do it on Locked On ACC. So I hope you're up for the challenge now, Donno. You know the ACC family. I call our viewers family for a reason because they tough on you. They tough on you. You know, you say the wrong thing, step out of line, they're gonna be on you.
Well, we got plenty to talk about on this episode, including the NC State women's team on their way to the Final Four. In the men's tournament, we are guaranteed a Final Four spot in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I do want to talk some football as well because the ACC has been a quarterback-heavy conference in recent years. So I want to take a look at the field of quarterbacks, including guys who have transferred in because there are several new faces in the conference. And this episode of Locked On ACC is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So, you know, when we look at those net rankings in college basketball, I'm a loyalist to the old RPI, if I'm being honest, right? The ACC, not strongly represented, and it happened to have a lot to do with playing tougher out-of-conference schedules than, let's say, the Big 12, who primarily played cream puffs, before January came in. And for the second straight year, Kenton, the ACC had record lows with only putting 5 teams into the NCAA tournament, and yet 4 of those 5 make it all the way to the Sweet 16. You get 3 in the Elite 8. You're going to get 1 now in the Final Four. We happen to be recording this during Duke versus NC State, which is a close ball game here in the first half, but guaranteed representation for the ACC. So it's like, and also, I know people are like, oh, this guy's complaining about net rankings. Who cares? No, I do care because, first of all, NC State, who's had a magical tournament run, only got into the NCAA tournament in the first place because they won 5 games in 5 days to pull off a Cinderella run in the ACC tournament. So they could have easily not gotten in, and they've made it this far. And the other part of it, Kenton, is like a lot of the success of a lot of coaches, especially in the Atlantic Coast Conference with their rich basketball history, are judged by whether you make the tournament or not. So when you're talking about only getting 5 teams in 2 straight years, jobs can be decided by this stuff.
Absolutely. And for a prime example, Jeff Capel had a much better season overall up until the ACC tournament started than Kevin Keats. That's just a fact. That's not a debatable. That's not there was this and there was that. No. Pitt saw more injuries than State. They saw more adversity that they're kind of out of your control than State did. And yet they finished ahead of State in the conference rankings. So this is a situation where, objectively speaking, it's all about March. What happens in March outweighs months of work before it. And that's, as much as people don't want to hear it, as much as people may get upset about that, as in the words of one Frank Sinatra, that's life. That's what it is. You can scream, shout, scream your head off about it, but that's what it is. And that is why I'm so upset with the net rating. I'm not an RPI guy. I'm not a net guy. I'm going to get the best damn teams in there, guy.
Exactly.
However, whatever metric you got to use to do it, do it. And if you're consistently seeing that one conference is overperforming what they're supposed to do in March every single time, why do we keep crying and throwing up? And they're so terrible. Oh, Jordan ain't walking through that door. James Worthy ain't walking through that door. JJ Redick ain't walking through that door. David Thompson, shut up. You know who is walking through that door? The Red and White NC State are now in the Elite Eight. You know who is walking through that door? The Duke Blue Devils now in the Elite Eight. The Clemson Tigers now in the Elite Eight. And we're allegedly top heavy according to John Rothstein. And yet, only one of the teams that got a double bye in the conference moved on to the Sweet 16. But we had 4. Oh, I'm sorry. 2 teams out of 4 had double byes. I apologize. 2 of the 4. Duke and the boys in Baby Blue, North Carolina. Those were the only 2 that had the double bye. Everybody else was outside of the top 4, and yet somehow, it's just such a top-heavy conference, Donno. You must understand these things, my boy. It's elementary. Oh, come on. It's a load of it.
Yeah, well, I don't buy the top-heavy argument because the ACC performed so well out of conference early on in the year. So it's like, at a certain point, don't you just say, hey, they beat up on each other in the regular season, and sometimes a team that's perceived to be a terrible ACC team is going to overperform their expectations. Like I saw Florida State do that for a lot of the year, and they're going to beat some good teams in the ACC.
Yeah, and the thing that I most don't understand about this is when you talk about, well, hey, they're beating up on each other. Why is it that it's only the Big 12 in basketball and the SEC in football that get this idea of, man, they're just cannibalizing each other. All these great teams are just cannibalizing.
It doesn't work in the ACC for some reason.
ACC in every sport, whatever happens, that's just 1 or 2 at the top. Everybody else is terrible. LOL, UNC lost to Georgia Tech. What a terrible conference. Kansas lost to Oklahoma State. Hear me out. What's going on here? What's going on? To me, I'm tired of even talking about how they underrate us because at this time, look at the performance. Look at the performance, baby. Look where the records are. Look what the head-to-head records are. Look what these conferences are doing and showing when people are actually having to get on the hardwood. At the end of the day, if ifs and buts were berries and nuts, squirrels would never starve. But we live in the real world. And in this here real world, there's this thing that has to happen where all of the teams, they get together. The 2 teams that are supposed to be playing each other, they get together on an agreed-upon site, and the refs throw the ball up in the air, and the 2 teams do their best to, within the rules, put the ball in the basket. That's what happens. And somehow, time and time again, this old lowly, this ain't your dad's ACC continues to make everybody else their sons in the tournament. This may not be your dad's ACC, but I'll tell you, a lot of folks have to call them daddy if we talk about what they do in the teams in this tournament.
It makes me think with the way that the ACC, even in these last couple of years when they only get 5 teams in, and last year was a lot of fun for me seeing Miami make that magical run to the Final Four. They were not one of the good teams in the ACC this year. They were nowhere close to making to the NCAA tournament, but hopefully next year they can revive themselves. But in seeing the type of continued success in basketball, it really makes me sad in a way when I see everything that's going on with this conference realignment talk. And I know I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because listen, as a Miami guy, I've not always, been happy with the ACC. I'm not as angry as the Florida State fans who are storming the headquarters with pitchforks or anything like that. I don't always speak favorably about the football side of the conference, but it's like, man, they're really trying to break this thing up. Like Clemson and Florida State are really trying to sue their way out of this. And then if that were to happen, Kenton, I think all bets are off. Right? Obviously, the ACC's best way to stay together is to try and keep these teams in. I don't know if there's any way they can reconcile with Florida State and make them happy again, but they're trying not to let them out of the conference. But I feel like if Florida State and Clemson, if they can find a way to break the grant of rights, the floodgates might open at that point, and I don't know what the future is going to look like in the ACC.
Well, the question lies within the answer in terms of what happens to the ACC with Clemson and Florida State gone. It's what happens to the ACC with Clemson and Florida State. They'll be fine. And I say it from this standpoint. Let's pretend that the floodgates do open. So who do you think are the next 2 most likely teams to go? Just give me your top two that you would say if Florida State, Clemson found a way. These two.
Based on the reporting, it sounds like Virginia would be the third out the door, and then North Carolina, I think, as well. It sounds like those would be the next two.
I'm glad that those are the two. You know why I'm so glad that those are the two?
Why?
Both of those are public land-grant universities. You know what that means for both of them? They're tied. They're legally tied to another school. So now it's not about, is North Carolina's brand big enough to go elsewhere? Is North Carolina and NC State's brand big enough to go elsewhere?
Yes.
It's not, is UVA's brand big enough? And let's be honest, UVA, I have no problem with the Who's, but UVA is a basketball school. And last time I checked, Donno, the Big East still exists for basketball, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Is there a Big East for football?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay.
No, there's not anymore.
Okay, so it seems to me that football is the main driver of this thing, and UVA and UNC don't have top football brand. But even if we did, UNC has to take NC State. Virginia has to take their brother up in Blacksburg. So who? I say who? Because you're not just coming with you, and we've talked about this before. You're bringing new mouths to the table. Everybody loves to say, "Oh, my team goal will bring new revenue." Yes, but you're also a new person taking the cut of the pie.
Splitting it up. It's a bigger pie to cut now.
Exactly. So if you are bringing in, let's say, $20 million worth in revenue, but you are taking out $35 million in revenue, why would the Big Ten take you?
It's a net
Why
negative.
would the SEC take you?
Yeah.
Why would they? They're in a good spot. If they just watch the ACC destroy itself and everybody swears, "Oh, my team is going," I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to leave it right here because I know we got to pay some bills, but this is what I always say about these things. Get off the message boards and pay attention to the people who make millions of dollars to do this stuff. Every time I hear one of the people who makes millions to do this talk about the ACC in their school, hey, I'm happy here. We're good here. The only two people that didn't give that message were Florida State execs and administrators and Clemson administrators. That was it. I haven't heard anything to the contrary from any of these other schools. I haven't. And if there is new information, or I admit I'm not infallible. I'm not that plugged in at every university to where every bit of chatter gets by, nothing gets by me. If I have missed something, please tell me. But as it stands right now, these folks are not fools. The best that some of these schools could do, the best, absolute best, possibly the Big 12. But then what?
Lateral move, in my opinion.
You're getting the lawyers, you're paying the millions to make a lateral move. Stop it. Stop it. That's not happening. So I think if Florida State and Clemson are to leave, we'll be looking at a situation where the Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. You know, it's unfortunate to see your heavy hitters go. But again, I think that the Big 12 and ACC need to realize if our heavy hitters left and Texas and Oklahoma did it in a way that they didn't have to pay a dime because they waited out their contract. If there's a loophole that allows Clemson and Florida State to leave without paying a cost, you know, I'll tell you, boss man D'Lo said in his freestyle, and I think we all can live by it. You want to be the boss? You got to pay the price. And that's what we're looking at for all these teams.
Well, we got all these teams together for at least one more year. We got some new quarterbacks in the conference. I want to discuss when we come back who's going to be the best quarterback in the ACC this year and who are the most underrated, because there are some conversations we need to have. Kenton, Gibbs, Alex Donno, Locked on ACC. Keep it locked. And I know you guys are keeping it locked to Game Time. Buying last-minute tickets should not be a stressful experience. In fact, the prices get better at Game Time, day before the event. It used to be frustrating to find these last-minute deals. Now I crave them on the Game Time app. So, guys, opening weekend in baseball, March Madness, NHL games. There's so much going on at Game Time. The last-minute deals are fantastic. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. The zone deals are great. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. The all-in pricing is amazing. They don't slap on those hidden fees at the very end. And the Game Time price guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV daily? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kenton, are you going to try to convince me that Cam Ward is not going to be the best quarterback in the ACC this year? I'm not saying the most successful, right? I'm not saying he'll be the most successful, but coming in off 3,735 yards last year, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, I'm probably a little bit biased because I've watched him in practice for the past 3 weeks. He looks like the real deal. Are you going to try to convince me that Miami's transfer out of Washington State won't be the best quarterback in the conference this year?
No, but what I will say, what I will convince you of is this is the most mercurial group of quarterbacks and most mercurial group of potential quarterback play that we've seen in the ACC in quite some time. Remember back in the days of 2023 and 2022? Oh, those were the good old glory days, I tell you, so long ago. It feels like forever ago, where you had all of these incumbents coming back, where you had all these really experienced guys coming back, where you had all these guys where you got 4 or 5 years worth of tape on this guy coming back. Remember the days of a Kenny Pickett, of a Devin Leary, of all those guys? You know, you had Sam Howell and all that stuff, and you knew who these quarterbacks, you knew exactly who that guy was going into the season. This year, I kid you not, this feels like it feels like the you know, you're walking your way through the dark, you know, it feels like you woke up in the middle of a blackout and you're just feeling your way around your house. Like, I know what should be here. I know in my mind what should, but I'm not sure what's actually going on there. This is the exact same type of situation because all of these quarterbacks are either coming into new situations or they're they're having new coordinators, or what may be the worst of all, they may be in a situation where it's the same quarterback, but in a very different situation in terms of the talent around them and things like that. So, you know, it's not easy to predict where these quarterbacks are going to be. And there is a mini world where Cam Ward finishes hands down the best of the bunch.
Well, and I'm thinking, you know, a couple of the quarterbacks that I'm just so intrigued by, guys that are in new teams, came over to the ACC. Malik Murphy at Duke, because I know the physical upside is through the roof with him as the backup, and got a lot of playing time at Texas last year. But to me, he's not polished, but there's a ton of upside if he can get the right coaching. Now, you know, he's obviously losing Riley Leonard and replacing him with Malik was a blow to Duke, and he's lost some of the talent around him, which we can talk about. I'm so curious because I know what that guy is capable of physically, okay? And then another one where a guy who I think was carried by his supporting cast at Ohio State, you know, Kyle McCord at Syracuse. I mean, I obviously he made some important throws and clutch throws, but he, you know, throwing to a guy like Marvin Harrison makes your life a lot easier. And with that defense makes your life a lot easier. So I cannot wait to see what he looks like outside of Columbus next year.
Here's the thing. This is why I say it's very mercurial, because again, you know, to my Orange fans, I love you. We got all the love in the world for you. We love us some Coach Fran on this show. Okay, we love us some Coach Fran. We hope all the best for him. He's crushing it on the recruiting trail. I do not get why a lot of these transfer quarterbacks are being hailed immediately as like they're the guy. And although I wouldn't say Kyle McCord is the number one suspect in that regard, He's one of them. He'll be in the lineup. If we picking out, hey, who's the fraud? He'll be in the lineup. He'll be in the lineup. Like you said, it's easy when you're throwing to wide receiving cores that consists of 2, 3, 4 guys that are all going to be playing on Sundays. You will not get that anywhere else in the country. That Ohio State wide receiver room is so good. I'm going to tell you about a guy named Jamison Williams. He was at Ohio State, buried under the depth chart, couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't sniff the field. He goes to some unnamed school in Tuscaloosa. I don't know. They're the Rolling Tides or the Crimson Elephants or something along those lines. I don't know. But he lit the world on fire for Nick Saban. That it's easy when you are throwing to guys like that. That's not everywhere. Where that guy who ended up being a number 12 overall draft pick is like, he can't get on the field here. So with that being said, I'm leery about Kyle McCord, but I'm also very leery about Malik. Just being very honest, everybody's telling me, oh, he's the second coming. He's the second. I'm not going to lie and say I've watched enough of his all 22 to make a definitive stance one way or the other. I have not. But what I will say is in the limited amount that I have watched, there are plays where you think, oh, this is Cam Newton's back. There are plays where you watch and you say, Joe Milton's got a twin. Good to see. Good to see. Either way, you really don't know what you're going to get. And, how many not just starts did that Duke offensive line lose? How many all ACC starts did that Duke offensive line lose? And Graham Barton and Monk going on to the league and all that good stuff, or, transferring out, and some other players like Jordan Waters, all conference back, who's now playing in Raleigh. I'm not sold on, hey, expect for Malik to be what Riley Leonard was or better, because if you're doing that, can we even evaluate him fairly? Can we do so? And again, I'll say the same thing for the guy that's in Raleigh, in Grayson McCall. With what we saw in the quarterback play the last few years, where NC State has had 4 quarterbacks in 1 year, and then the other year we had a quarterback that didn't look good and couldn't hit the side of a warehouse, and then the young guy looked good, but then he redshirt again, and then is up and down and all around. And if Grayson McCall is just decent and the Wolfpack have the year they're supposed to have on paper, he'll be hailed as the greatest thing out of Raleigh since Russell Wilson or Jacoby Brissett.
By the way, Grayson McCall, I think, because obviously, everyone, has an idea who DJ Uiagalelei are and who Cam Ward are, but Grayson McCall, that is one for me to watch. Like, I started to study him. Miami ended up working things out with Cam Ward, but before that happened, I thought, why are we not going after this guy? I really thought Grayson McCall, he doesn't have to travel very far from Coastal Carolina to NC State. I think he could end up being one of the better stories in this conference. I'll tell you, to me, probably the most underrated quarterback in the ACC, who, he did start last season with Boston College, but I see him near the bottom of most of the quarterback lists, and I don't really understand why. If you want to put his team, near the bottom, do what you have to do. Although he carried them farther than I think they would have gone without him, and that's Thomas Castellanos at Boston College.
Absolutely.
And he's got to polish up his passing accuracy a little bit through 57.3% last year, but the dual threat capabilities and the big play capabilities. This guy ran for over 1,100 yards, 13 rushing touchdowns to go with the 15 passing touchdowns. The downside was the 14 interceptions, right? Yeah. Obviously, he's got to clean that up, but now he's got Bill O'Brien coaching him at Boston College. I think Castellanos could take a big step up this year.
Here's the thing. I'm not a big fan of O'Brien, but I'm not a big fan of BC's receiving room. I think that's one of the more overrated receiving rooms in the ACC. Everybody talks about how good they are, how special they are, and then when you turn on the film, those boys couldn't get a separation from a wife that they hate, can't stand her, can't get away from her fast enough. And I don't think they get separation. But with that being said, I do think that, Bill O'Brien's scheme and all that, and the way that he coaches quarterbacks, that's one thing I will give Bill O'Brien, right? His ability to be a leader of men overall and to lead an entire team, suspect. His ability to get quarterbacks to understand the game a little bit better and understand the different nuances and complexities of the game in a way that they would not otherwise, I'll give him his flowers in that regard. And I love me some Thomas Castellanos. That is a ball player. I watched that game against Army. He single-handedly said, I won't allow us to lose. Not today. Not today. He was making guys miss and making things happen when he tucked that ball under his arm. But guess what? In the words of a famous for the wrong reasons reporter, I like my quarterbacks to be quarterbacky. And he's got to find a way. He's got to find a way to in fact, be a better passer from the pocket and make those better decisions. Because, yes, his receivers did struggle to get open at times, but there were also some moments where he wasn't making great decisions. Yes, they were down a lot, and there were times where it was like he had to force something. But there are still moments where if you make a better decision early, you don't get into that situation where you're down and got a forced leg. So, there's a lot to be said about Thomas Castellanos, and I absolutely think he's one of the more underrated guys. And I'll tell you this, if Tony Elliott knows what's good for him, he's going to start my underrated guy and a fellow Tony Calandria. If you trot Tony Musket out on that field, Tony Elliott, you deserve what you're getting. You deserve what you're getting, and what you're getting is going to be a nice little buyout, and they're going to say, hey, it's been real, it's been fun. Here's the rest of your bread. We don't ever want to see you around here no more. Not around here, player. You go back to Clemson, go back to wherever. I don't care. Just get from around here. Get. And that's what it's going to be.
When we come back, it's not just the men's tournament that has ACC representation, but the women's tournament as well in the Final Four. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. This is Locked On ACC. If you're a sports fan, if you're watching this and listening to this, I'm sure you are, you need to get Amazon Fire TV in your life. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides you access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Kenton, I go back to selection weekend, and I felt that my Lady Canes were very hard done because every bracketologist had them getting into the tournament. I thought they got screwed over, but your NC State Wolfpack, they're on a run to the Final Four. Talk to me about it. Oh, I think you're muted.
Westmore in the Final Four. What more could you ask for, baby? No, but seriously, Westmore's been knocking on the door for this thing for so long. And it's so interesting that, they got to the Elite Eight one year and they had to play Connecticut in Connecticut, even though they were the higher seeded team. What a time that was. What a game that turned out to be. Many people called it the game of the century in women's basketball. And yet there was one team that had a true home game, more or less, in that game. Interesting. With that being said, all of the snake bitterness, you talk about years of NC State not winning conference championships in men's basketball, football or baseball and all those things. And then you talk about men's finally getting over the hump. And then you talk about, women have won multiple. They won 3 back-to-back conference championships. And what's next for them? Well, they've got to kick down the door, go to the Final Four. They've got to make it real good and get a chip. Hang that big banner in Raleigh. Not the we got close one. Hang the one that says we want it all. We want it all. And Westmore and Company, I said, and this is documented. If you don't believe me, go back to Locked On Wolfpack on the day of the selection. I said, I don't know what has happened, but NC State got the most favorable draw possible. Because in their bracket, there was nobody that I said, if NC State's playing their best game and that team plays their best game, the NC State has no shot or it'll even be close. I said that, and lo and behold, who's coming out of their region? Oh, yeah,
You know ball, my
friends. Go State.
I love it. Well, guys, tune in tomorrow because taking a deep dive on ACC quarterbacks today. I want to talk about ACC football coaches tomorrow. We're going to have the Final Four slate to break down, which is going to provide us with a lot of content the next few days since that's going to be coming up Saturday and the championship game on Monday. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Follow him on X at TGIF_Kenton. Follow me at Alex Donno. I'm from Locked On Canes. We will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.